What if I told you that some of the earliest Quran manuscripts don't match the version billions read today? That entire variants and verses once written down were later ordered to be burned by the early Islamic rulers themselves. We're told the Quran has never changed, that every letter is identical, word for word, since the time of Muhammad. But history tells a very different story. Today we're diving into one of the most sensitive topics in Islamic history, how the Quran was compiled, edited, and standardized, and why some verses were deleted. This isn't opinion, it's archaeology, it's manuscript evidence, and it's all backed by Islamic sources themselves. Discovered in 1972 during restoration work in the Great Mosque of Sana'a, Yemen, the Sana'a manuscript is one of the oldest surviving Quranic texts ever found. Radiocarbon dating places it as early as the late 600s AD, which means it likely originates from within a few decades of Muhammad's death. But what makes this manuscript so important is not just its age, it's what's written inside. Unlike the standardized Quran we have today, the Sana'a manuscript contains numerous textual variations, corrections, and even erased lines, palimpsests with completely different wording underneath. Some verses are missing, while others appear in a different order or phrased differently. Scholars working on the manuscript, like Gerd Puin and Benham Sadeghi, have shown that the lower text, the original layer beneath the corrections, reflects a version of the Quran that predates Uthman's standardized version. That's not speculation, it's physical evidence. Someone wrote a Quranic text, and then someone else came along, erased it, and replaced it with a more standardized version. This aligns precisely with what early Islamic sources tell us. Caliph Uthman ibn Affan, about 20 years after Muhammad's death, commissioned an official version of the Quran and ordered all other versions to be burned, as reported in Sahih al-Bukhari 4987. The goal was unity, but in the process, variations and alternate readings were destroyed. And yet, thanks to the Sana'a discovery, we now know they existed. The manuscript proves something crucial. The Quran was not a single fixed text from the very beginning. It went through stages, edits, and erasures, just like other ancient texts. That doesn't mean it has no value, but it does mean that the popular claim that the Quran is unchanged is simply not supported by history, archaeology, or Islamic records. According to early Islamic sources, including Sahih al-Bukhari 4987, around 20 years after Muhammad's death, Caliph Uthman noticed growing disputes among Muslims over how the Quran should be recited. Regional dialects, differing memories, and various written fragments were all in circulation. To prevent division, Uthman took decisive action. He assembled a committee to compile an official version of the Quran and then ordered all other versions to be destroyed. This wasn't a matter of copying out what everyone already had. It was a purge. Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy of what they had copied and ordered that all the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, be burnt. At first glance, this sounds like an effort to preserve unity, but when we examine it critically, it raises uncomfortable questions. If every version was already identical, why was there a need to burn anything? Why not simply compare and affirm consistency? The only reason to destroy manuscripts is if they didn't all say the same thing, and when we compare that to archaeological finds like the Sana'a manuscript, it becomes clear that there were differences in wording, structure, and verse order. Uthman's action wasn't just about preventing division, it was about enforcing uniformity, even if that meant erasing parts of the tradition. This act of centralization rewrote how future generations would view the Quran. It presented a finalized, pure text, while quietly erasing any trace of its complex development. But thanks to surviving fragments like those found in Sana'a, we now know that history isn't so simple. When scholars began analyzing early Quranic manuscripts, especially the lower text of the Sana'a palimpsest, they found something that shook a central claim of modern Islamic belief. These variations are not small details like spelling or calligraphy. They involve substantial textual differences. For example, in Surah 9, certain verses are phrased differently than in the standard Cairo edition. Some manuscripts include additional words or phrases, while others omit known lines altogether. The order of surahs and verses was not fixed in many early codices. German scholar Gerd Puin, who led the restoration project on the Sana'a manuscripts, noted, "The Quran claims for itself that it is mubin, or clear, but if you look at it, you will notice that every fifth sentence or so simply doesn't make sense. The fact is that a fifth of the Quranic text is just incomprehensible." Beyond Sana'a, other manuscripts, like those in Paris, BNF Arabe 328, and the Topkapi and Samarkand codices also show differences in arrangement, orthography, and content compared to the modern Hafs version used across most of the Islamic world today. So what does this mean? It doesn't prove the Quran is a fabrication, but it proves that the text evolved, that what exists today is the result of standardization, editing, and selection, not a perfect one-time revelation copied verbatim through the centuries. This aligns with what Islamic tradition itself says. There were multiple versions and readings, and Uthman chose one. But once again, if something has to be chosen and others destroyed, then it's not identical to what came before. And when modern Muslims are told their book has never changed, not a single letter, this historical evidence says otherwise. The evidence is clear. Early Quranic manuscripts reveal a history of variation, revision, and human intervention. This doesn't come from outside critics. It comes from archaeology, from within Islamic sources, and from the manuscripts themselves. The myth of an unchanged, word-for-word identical Quran from the time of Muhammad simply doesn't hold up under scrutiny. So here's the question every honest seeker should ask. If even the foundations of Islam reveal cracks under historical light, shouldn't we ask what is actually true? Unlike a text edited under political pressure, the Bible carries a consistent story of redemption, fulfilled prophecy, and a Savior who doesn't just demand loyalty, but offers grace. Jesus didn't build an empire by force. He gave his life so you could find yours. If you're searching for truth, start with the words of Jesus. Open the Gospel of John. Ask God sincerely to show you what's real. If this video challenged you, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe for more historical and biblical deep dives, and God bless you.